is our bulletin, and thank you to Amy and David for sponsoring the Shabbat Cafe, and Bob and Fran as well. Just thinking about Bob for a second, and Andrew, they'll appreciate, a teacher of mine once said, I think it was Harold Schulweis, it's easier to change your audience than your talk, right? As a speaker, it's much easier to go from venue to venue with the same talk than it is to be interesting every week. And so I try and work at being interesting. It's not always so easy. I want to explore something a little different to open up today. This is an email that Marcy sent me like 5 years ago, and it's cute and it's interesting. I think it's kind of funny, and we're going to put it on as a little performance up here. So it's called God's Thoughts on Lawns, yards, lawns, and it features God. I'm going to play the role of God. St. Francis. Here's St. Francis. And just a little cameo appearance at the end.
I feel like I need to remove my tallit.
Yeah, St. Francis probably didn't wear a tallis. And at the end, St. Catherine. So Frank, you know all about gardens and nature. What in the world is going on down there in planet Earth? What happened to the dandelions, to the weeds, the violets, the thistle, the stuff that I started eons ago? I had perfect no-maintenance garden plan for those people down on Earth. Those plants grow in any type of soil. They withstand drought, multiply with abandon. The nectar from the long-lasting blossoms attracts butterflies, honeybees, flocks of songbirds. I expected by now, thousands of years later, to see a vast garden of colors, but all I see are these rectangles, these green, ugly rectangles.
It's the tribes that settled there, Lord. It's the suburbanites. They started calling your flowers weeds and went to great lengths to kill them and replace them with grass.
Grass? But it's so boring. It's not colorful. It doesn't attract butterflies, birds, bees, only grubs and sodworms. It's sensitive to temperatures. Do these suburbanites really want all that grass growing there?
Apparently so, Lord. They go to great pains to grow it and keep it green. They begin each spring by fertilizing the grass and poisoning any plant or any other plant that crops up in the lawn.
The spring rains and warm weather probably make the grass grow really fast. That must make the suburbanites happy.
Well, apparently not, Lord, because as soon as it grows a little, I hate to say it, but they cut it. Sometimes twice a week.
They cut it? What do they, bale it like hay?
Not exactly, Lord. Most of them rake it up and then they put it in bags.
They bag it? What is it, a cash crop? Do they sell it?
Well, no, just the opposite. They actually pay to throw it away.
Let me get this straight. They fertilize grass so it'll grow, and when it does grow, they cut it off and pay to throw it away?
Yes, sir.
These suburbanites must be relieved in the summer when we cut back on the rain and turn up the heat. That surely slows the growth and saves them a lot of work.
You know, you aren't going to believe this, Lord, but, when the grass stops growing so fast, they actually drag out hoses and pay more money to water it so that it will continue to grow, and then they mow it, and then they pay to get rid of it.
What nonsense. At least they kept some of the trees. That was a sheer stroke of genius, if I do say so myself. The trees grow leaves in the spring to provide beauty and shade in the summer. In the autumn, of course, the leaves fall to the ground and form a natural blanket of moisture, keeps the soil protected, the trees and the bushes. Plus, as they rot, those leaves form compost to enhance the soil. It's like the natural cycle of life, right?
You better sit down, God. These suburbanites, they've drawn a new circle. As soon as the leaves fall, they also rake those up into great piles and then pay to have those piles hauled away.
I don't believe this. What do they do to protect the shrub and the tree roots in the winter and keep the soil moist and loose?
Well, after throwing away their leaves, they do go out and buy something which they then call mulch. They haul it home and spread it all around in place of the leaves.
Where do they get this mulch?
They cut down trees and grind them up to make the mulch.
Enough. I don't want to talk about this anymore. St. Catherine, you're in charge of tonight's arts. What movie do you have scheduled for us?
Dumb and Dumber. Lord, it's a really stupid movie about...
Catherine, I don't want to hear about it. I think I just heard it all from St. Frank. All right? God's thoughts on lawns, ladies and gentlemen. St. Francis and St. Catherine. So we won't give up our day jobs. But I think it is an important message. It's funny, and it's also an important message of where we are in the calendar, because any homeowner knows, right, that yards are crazy business. It is. It's crazy business. Right? What do? We spend all this time getting it ready and preparing it, and then to go into another cycle of getting it ready and preparing it. It's this constant, perpetual motion of energy and activity to grow it, to cut it, to grow it, to cut it. It's just a constant end of service, of challenges. Owning a yard is messy business. But the truth is so is owning a home that sits on top of that yard. Any of you have gone through Passover and really gone through it. Not just you showed up to the Seder, that's great, it's a mitzvah, but for those of us who cooked, who cleaned, who scoured our homes to get rid of the chametz, the bread, the bunny crackers in the couch, on the couch, under the couch, in the car, underneath the car seats, honey, bunny crackers everywhere. I kid you not, I found a bunny cracker in the light fixture this year. I have no idea how the 3-year-old got a bunny cracker into the light fixture. It is messy, yucky business cleaning out for Passover. And any of you who have ever gotten rid of all of your chametz or tried, you know it's impossible. You simply cannot find it all, because having a yard is messy business, and having a home is even messier business. No matter how hard you try, life is messy. And that was my talk 2-3 weeks ago about the messy nature of relationships. But I realized in preparing for today's conversation that I had to continue the conversation about mess. Why? Portion. Tazria Mitzora. Now, Tazria Mitzora is not Genesis. Genesis is like, the highlights of the Jewish royalty, right? You got Abraham and Sarah and Rebecca and Isaac and Jacob and story after story. It's like every bat mitzvah's dream come true to get one of those for your bat mitzvah to talk about. It's easy. And then there's Exodus. Not Genesis, but, everybody loves Charlton Heston and the Splitting Seas and the Passover narrative, right? A bat mitzvah would love to have gotten that one to talk about. And then there's Leviticus, which is the book we're in now, and it's not Genesis and it's not Exodus, it's Leviticus. And Leviticus is tough going. But within Leviticus, there's like the toughest, the most difficult of the most difficult, Tazria Mitzora, this week's Torah portion, which every bar bat mitzvah, when they get it, dreads it, which is why I try and give them the one before or the one after, because what did we read about today? We read about leprosy and lesions and scabies and skin disease and menstruation and all kinds of ooey gooey, yucky, bodily, decaying, dying stuff. It is as messy as it gets in the Torah and in life. Frankly, it's quite disgusting if you read the English, which is the only time of the year I wish it was only in Hebrew, so we wouldn't read the English. Because the truth is this gives Judaism a bad name. It gives religion a bad name. It gives the naysayers an opening, a piticha, as we say, an opening to say, see, I told you, Judaism is archaic. Religion is antiquated. It's irrelevant to modern life. And if you read Tazria Mitzora, if you read about all of these bodily emission stuff as biblical dermatology, it is irrelevant because it's not good science. That's not what it existed for. And if you read it as God's way of punishing, I call it punishing through pimples, right? If this is how God acts, then I can't believe in that God. Because I don't believe in a God who punishes through pimples and through putrid diseases and other icky, nasty stuff. So what do? How do we save a Torah portion as nitty and gritty and ugly and gruesome as Tazria Mitzora? And here's how we do it. And actually, it's a profound teaching. It's an important teaching. It is relevant to our lives. But you have to back up. And you have to understand it in its context. So this week's Torah portion is amidst the journey of the temple. We've erected the temple. We've created the temple. Now we got to run the temple. And who runs the temple? The Kohen, the Kohanim, the Kohen Gadol, the priests, the priestly class, the high priest. What is the priest, or what are the priests supposed to do? They're supposed to remain in a state of purity, right? We're supposed to be ready as Kohanim to go into the Holy of Holies at any moment to serve God. And so therefore, the Kohanim had to distance themselves from all of the nitty-gritty, ooey-gooey, yucky stuff that was happening down on the streets. The Jews in the pews, the Israelites, they dealt with all of the stuff down on the streets, but the Kohanim would immerse in the mikvah, cleansing themselves, purifying themselves, so that at a moment's notice they'd be ready for the sacrificial system. They'd be in a state of purity. And it seemingly has its place. And it seemingly is the ideal. Getting feedback, I'm going to turn this off. We don't have Chris today. So what do we do with this? What do we do with this this message? Here's what we do with it. We read in the Torah portion today that God says to the Kohanim, to the priestly class, right? Over and over, he says, Re'eh HaKohen, right? To the Kohen, to the priest, go out into the world and literally, Re'eh, see. Over and over, it uses this phrase, go out and see what life is like down outside the ivory tower. Leave the temple for a little bit and go out to the Tazria, to the Metzora, to the people who are suffering in the streets, to the people who have leprosy, who are dealing with all kinds of life's challenges. It isn't just bodily and skin disease. Go out and see what life is like for the Israelites, for the average person. Life is difficult. Life is challenging. Life is messy. Out in the real world, when you leave the ivory tower of theory behind, people make mistake after mistake after mistake. They hurt each other. They betray each other. Right? We are imperfect beings. So Mr. Cohen, not you, Mr. Cohen, but Mr. Cohen, if you want to be a true leader, then leave the ivory tower and go out into the world and see that no matter how hard you try to avoid life's weeds pop up time and again. Weeds are a part of life. Weeds, mistakes, transgressions, imperfections, it's part and parcel of who we are. And not only that, it's an important piece of life. The Kotzker Rebbe, a great thinker in Judaism, once said, the only whole heart is a broken heart. I mean, it's very profound. It's like a Zen koan, if you think about it. The only whole heart is a broken heart, right? You can't have wholeness without brokenness. Or in our conversation today, perfection contains within it imperfection. If you want to be perfect, then you have to be imperfect. You have to accept the brokenness and the weeds and imperfections in other people. 3 weeks ago, our conversation, and today in ourself, because we all have imperfections. And this is a modern message, because we have defined piety and purity and perfection as Mother Teresa or as Gandhi or as Martin Luther King Jr., why we reserve perfection for a handful of the elite few throughout history or in our world today. The challenge is none of us are ever going to be Mother Teresa or Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. So can we not achieve perfection? Our tradition says these men and women were not perfect. They were not saints. As Jews, we don't have saints. We don't believe in saints. Why? Because a saint is somebody who is infallible. But in our tradition, rabbis and priests and ministers and teachers and anybody and everybody, parents, we're all fallible. We're all imperfect. We all have weeds in our garden. The Talmud takes it a step further. And this is an amazing teaching. I love this teaching, and I've carried it with me for many years. In the Talmud, they're talking about qualities of leadership. What does it take to be an authentic leader in a Jewish community? Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yechozdak, one should not appoint anyone to a leader of a community unless he, or we would say she, carries with him or her a bag of bugs, right? A bag of bugs, which they wear on their back. They carry with them on their back, lest they become arrogant. And if they do become arrogant, all you say is, Mr. Leader, turn around. Don't you got a bag of bugs on your back? Or we might say in our language, a skeleton in the closet, or weeds in the yard. Bag of bugs is necessary. It's crucial if you want to be a leader in life, because nobody is perfect, and we need to remind ourselves as leaders of imperfections as an important piece of who we are. But this is not only about being a leader, because each and every one of us is a leader in our own way. Each and every one of us, right, is in a community of all kinds, many different types of communities. And so we need to think about this very seriously, right? Not about perfectionism, because we struggle with that now more than ever before in history. Perfectionism. I see it day in, day out with little kids, with their parents, with their grandparents. We are struggling with images, ideals of perfect bodies, perfect careers, perfect marriages, perfect parenting skills, perfect children with perfect behavior, perfect grades so they get into the perfect school so then they can repeat the cycle of perfection. And when we don't see perfection, we panic as individuals and as communities and as a society. We panic and we want to put Roundup on our lawns, right? We poison the weeds and we want to cover up our bodies or imperfections, blemishes on our face. We want to cover up the imperfections in our life. We want to pretend like we don't have a closet filled with skeletons or a bag of bugs on our back. And what do we do in that process? We deny and we hide and we pretend and we lie and we live inauthentic, incomplete lives, spending so much time pretending that we don't have a bag of bugs. And we all know what that's like because all of us have done it from time to time. And you know when you pretend to be something you're not, when you pretend to be this perfect image, it's exhausting. It is absolutely tiring trying to get every single weed as it pops up so that the neighbors don't see it, running around your yard, squirting poison on things, right? It's depleting, constantly focusing on one's shortcomings, on what one isn't, not what one is. It is truly a burden, and it wears you down. You start to loathe yourself. You start to berate yourself. You live with so much guilt and shame over the imperfections. And then we try and say it's not us. I'm not the imperfections. I'm only the perfections. And then we have an incomplete sense of self. We have an inauthentic sense of self because God created us perfectly imperfect. And the truth is, we say I'm no Mother Teresa, but here's the truth. Mother Teresa was no Mother Teresa. Gandhi was no Gandhi. Martin Luther King Jr. was no Martin Luther King Jr. We have images of them that they didn't even have of themselves, and they're not possible. We found out posthumously, right, that Mother Teresa had doubts about God and of her faith. And we should say to ourselves, of course she did, because she's imperfect. She was imperfect, just like the rest of us. Less imperfect than me, but certainly still imperfect. And that's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be celebrated. And that's what we need to start to do, is to celebrate the weeds in our garden and in our yards, not to run around trying to hide them and fix them all the time and deny them. And so I'm going to end with this. Passover is over. Passover was about freedom. And you can read through the Haggadah and you can tell the story, and you still haven't fulfilled freedom. What is freedom? Freedom is to stop expecting other people to not have a bag of bugs or to expect ourselves not to have a bag of bugs. Passover is about liberation. You want to talk about liberation? Then go over to your closet and just finally open the door. You don't have to go around showing the world your skeletons, but maybe you show a spiritual leader. You have confession. We have it in Catholicism. We have it in Judaism. You just get it out. At the very least, you confess it. You're honest about it to yourself. That's liberation. You want to talk about redemption? Redemption is when we give up the fantasy, the fallacy that our yard will ever be completely without weeds, that we will get rid of the closet filled with skeletons, that we won't have a bag of bugs on our back. The sooner we can come to terms with our messy yards and our messy houses and our messy cars and our messy relationships and our messy lives, right? Then and only then will we be free. So accept yourself. Accept the perfections, accept the imperfections, the wrinkles, the warts, the skeletons, the weeds, the bugs, and all. And so with that, we go into our Ruach rally, where we celebrate our perfections and our imperfections as individuals and families, as a community, as Am Yisrael. We have a downsized kind of day today because of of spring break. So what we don't have in numbers, we'll make up for in spirit, in Ruach, and energy, as we join together with Cantor Lana and the Ruach Rally Band. Page 187, Adon Olam, 187.